Welcome to No Clip, the podcast that's like a book club for people who don't think that books reward them enough for being good at them. I'm Chad Rowan.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And today, we're going to be talking about Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, a game that was developed and published by Lucasarts and was released in 1999 on, at the time, I want to say N64 Dreamcast? Was it on PC in 1999? Yep. That's crazy.
Windows, Macintosh, N64, Game Boy Color, and Dreamcast, I think. The original.
And then a remaster on the PS4, Switch, and Xbox One that came out in 2020.
Yes, and I assume that's on Steam as well, but all the lists I found just said PS4, Switch, and Xbox, so I don't know.
Yeah, here's what I know, and that is I played the Steam version of the game, and it did not have achievements, so I'm actually not sure. Also, I believe it actually says, like, release date 99.
Oh, okay. Well, it's just the original PC port then, or version.
Yeah, which is why. It probably a port, but... So, yeah, and... there's like 100 things I want to talk about when I start this episode. But hey, Andy, why did we societally, after 1999, continue making video games after we already made the coolest and the best one? Star Wars Episode 1 Racer.
Yeah, that's a good question. We really lost our innocence in the new millennium.
Yeah.
No, this game is pretty rad. I was not disappointed coming back to it.
Yeah, I was so fully expecting to be disappointed, and was not, and that alone shocked me into sort of a sense of euphoria while I was playing a lot of this game. Which it needed in places. It needed to have low expectations in order to sort of like get around some of the stranger decisions that they made. But there's a lot in here that is there's not a lot in here, and that is specifically why this game works, I think. It feels weirdly very focused for... There, in my brain, two like main genres of racing game. There is a kart racer, and then there's a simulation racer. And I guess this is a simulation racer because you can't throw a turtle shell at a guy.
Right. Yeah, I think it would fall under that. Because it also has the angle of like trying to like faithfully recreate how pod racing is described and depicted in the movie. It is super fast and super dangerous. Very true to the film. So, it does feel like a little bit of a simulation racer, I would say. From what I was able to gather, apparently after making Shadows of the Empire, which had a bunch of gameplay variety, where you could run around and shoot and ride vehicles and all kinds of stuff.
Land speeders. Yeah.
Apparently, that was like one of the things, like one of their goals was like, we want to make a more focused game. And apparently originally this was gonna be a kart racer, but then they ended up deciding not to do that. Which I think...
An idea which I presume became Super Bombad Racing.
Maybe. I feel like that was like so many years later. Or not so many.
It was a long time.
Yeah. Well, after Episode 1 came out.
That's true. And it's honestly kind of a shame that is the... I don't actually even know if that was a LucasArts developed game. Like, I think LucasArts kind of stopped developing games
they
by
may
the
have,
time came out.
like, not been a company anymore by that point. Like, that might have just been an EA game or something.
Yep, I think it was EA. And it sucks because it's such a bad idea when you have... this IP and the fact that like pod racing is a unique sort of way of like exploring the racing genre, to then just be like, what if we made a bad Mario Kart? Felt like maybe it wasn't the right move.
Right. And gave all the characters big bobbleheads.
Also, you had to give them big bobbleheads, which is very important. So, but yeah, I think I agree. I think that it does fall under simulation racer, and that focus is sort of what saves it. Also, just out of curiosity, have you played Shadows of the Empire?
I have not. I mean, I think I rented it from Blockbuster, the classic,
a classic
90s experience, but I didn't own it.
Right. That should be on our list for the future at some point, because that's another good Christmas time game. So let's give that a year to bake, and maybe
down.
we'll
Dude,
pull
I
it
gotta
out.
find all of the cool Star Wars games I didn't play as a kid. Because I found I was one of those weird kids who was like, I don't feel like there are any good Star Wars video games except this one. And I think I just didn't play any of the good ones.
Shadows of the Empire is not really one of the good ones. I don't know if I'm going to piss anybody off by saying that. It is very nostalgic to me. It also is janky as hell. But Star Wars is a franchise, and I think that this is relevant to this. Star Wars is a franchise that just has so many games that it just has the number of good games in it that are equivalent to whatever the average percentage of games are good, is kind of where it's at. I mean, you could definitely be like, okay, the LucasArts era maybe produced better games, but then you have things like Knights of the Old Republic, which is I almost said a Mass Effect. It is a Mass Effect game. It's a BioWare game, yeah. And you can definitely credit them for the good decisions that made that game good. But yeah, there's tons of garbage that sucks. But then there are a few standout games. And I love Racer because it falls to me kind of in the middle. I think it was a very popular game among people our age, meaning children, when it came out.
Right.
But it's never, I don't hear people talk about it that much. But as somebody who's not a big racing game fan, Podracer does everything right to make me want to enjoy it in a way that very few other racing games do.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I like kart racers a lot, but I'm not a big simulation racer fan. Usually if it's just fast cars, that's not
cheap
really,
thrills.
I don't really care. Yeah. If you had in Rich Girls and Fine Wine, though, I might be on board.
Yeah.
But this really does it for me as well. I mean, there's a number of factors in there why, which I'm sure we'll get into. But I'm kind of sad that the remaster didn't cause more buzz than it seems to have. Because and this might be verging into final thoughts territory, so we don't have to talk about it too much. But I'd love to see a full on remake or a sequel to this. I think it's that cool and unique of a racing game that you could totally do another one. And I think in 10 years ago, even I think it would have felt weird to put out a pod racing game. People would be like, "Who the fuck? No one likes the Phantom Menace. Why are you making this?" But now I feel like the interests are so niche, and I feel like you could put out a pod racing game and no one would even think it was weird now.
Yeah, and there's a level of ironic detachment specifically surrounding the Phantom Menace that I think people would get it. Honestly, I feel like there's probably some contingency of people who have already reattached themselves to Super Bombad Racing because it is bad and also funny,
right,
in a bad way. That I feel like a racer remake or sequel would actually sort of catch at least some group of people. And I would love to see a game made with this sensibility that sort of used more modern game design in its other elements, outside of the primary gameplay, because this game is a whole disaster mess of menus and weird stat bars and junkyard part pricing that we'll get into. But I could see a much more elegant touch applied to this to make it like a very fun game, and probably one that was multiplayer centric, which I wouldn't love, but it would probably happen. And I bet some people would love.
Yeah, you got to get the loot boxes to get all your pod racer parts.
Exactly. That's what I really wanted. I was like, cut the junkyard out, replace it with microtransactions.
Yeah, dude, Watto would love microtransactions. We all know this.
That's true. It's one of the few in-universe microtransaction justifications that exists. So, and if EA is going to be the one publishing it, I mean,
of course.
Yeah, no, I paused when I mentioned the thing that this game did things that other racing games don't do, in case that warranted like a right now explanation. But I think that, yeah, we both are sort of in agreement that it does have a certain special sauce to it that maybe other racing games have not in the past. And for me, obviously, that includes every kart racer, which is just like a genre that I don't jive with as a general rule. And like, if you asked me what my favorite racing game was, and I for some reason didn't think of Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, I feel like I would reach for like Gran Turismo. Like, I like the simulation a little bit more because it has that Monster Hunter style getting gear and like slowly upgrading and making yourself ready for each individual challenge on like a nitty gritty level. Racing doesn't really have that. Just having higher stats is always better.
Right.
But I do genuinely like the way that the single player, like the tournament mode, is set. Like, in terms of progression, like you earning money from races and then buying parts to upgrade your thing. And if you're like me, you choose a racer and you stay with them for the entire tournament mode to kind of like get things together. But that, to me, the thing that really fucking kills it in this game is the actual gameplay. But I do think it's worth talking about the artifice that surrounds it,
right? Which
I think is something very cool that this game does.
Yeah. I think a good place to jump into it is just like, I guess I shouldn't be surprised because this was made by Lucasarts, but and they would have like access to the same resources, I would imagine, as the people working on the movies. But like, how much they like nail the aesthetic and the feel of Star Wars in this, especially for like an N64 game. Like it looks like Star Wars, and like I love how when you boot it up, like the menu is kind of like a 3D like cantina bar, that you can like scroll around. And yeah, I like going to like Watto's shop, and you get the low poly Qui-Gon Jinn standing next to the counter. Yeah, it's just all really adds something like a charm to the game that just is feels surprisingly faithful to the movies.
Yeah, it has that, like, I mean, I think to me it's like Watto's there, and that's like all you need to evoke like everything that is both right and wrong about Episode 1. Like, the problem that a lot of people had with that movie when it came out was the level of sort of like ridiculous camp and the reliance on CGI and like things, or maybe honestly that's not what people had problems with at the time. That's what people have problems with looking back on it.
And even the Phantom Menace doesn't even have that much in comparison to the other two movies as far as the CGI
in the prequel
goes.
trilogy. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit ridiculous, but I feel like Watto sort of embodies that. Also, just like, I don't know. There's something about Watto just being the like one of the only named characters in the game that you can actually like interact with. It's extremely good. I love that he just uses the same lines that I presume were recorded for the game. I don't know. It just sounds great, looks great. He's super cool. But to me, that's what captures it. Like that, because a lot of people talk about this where it's like the pod racing scene, the Boon to Eve classic, in episode 1 is like, like a 10-15 minute part of a larger movie that everybody thought was cool and nobody liked any of the other stuff that happened.
Right.
And so having a whole game about pod racing is not necessarily reflective of the film, but the sort of playfulness, the childishness to an extent, having the racers insult each other every time that they go out to race, the inclusion of all of the ridiculous aliens that apparently all came from, according to the pull quotes on the back of the box, like these were racers that were in like design documents for the movie.
I know some of them are in the movie.
Yeah, like Ben Quadranero, everyone's favorite guy.
And like Gasgano, and I think there's like a handful of them are definitely in the movie. But yeah. Like I think it's especially impressive to me though, like when something like Knights of the Old Republic tries to go for like the Old Republic era of Star Wars, and not to like say anything bad about the game itself, but like I feel like in the art direction it doesn't feel as much like Star Wars to me. And I think this game does a really good job of like bridging the gap between the original trilogy and the prequels, like almost even better than the movie does, I think. Like there's like certain planets and levels that like have a original trilogy feel, and like others that like sprinkle in more of like a prequel, like more pristine, futuristic look, and it just all really works. And once again, it's super impressive that it's an N64 game, and maybe that even helps, like the fact that you're like going through the levels so fast. Like maybe like that level of detail you're able to like pick up on. I don't know, maybe that helps it. I don't know, but like I found that aspect really impressive.
Yeah, and I think it goes beyond that, where it's like because I agree with everything that you say. I think that but in addition, deserves even more praise, because like with the exception of Tatooine, I think, which every Star Wars game is going to include in some capacity, most of the planets that are included are not like famous named locations from the series that you're going to show up on. It's not, one of them is like just an asteroid also, which is great.
Right.
And so like there's a bunch of these different like places that you go to that all have their own horribly letterboxed full motion video intro to them. That is very quaint and of the time, but also does a great job of sort of it presents you with that before you race in the level, so that you have in your mind's eye what they want it to look like.
Right.
And then you race in it, and it allows your brain to fill in those details that the N64 is incapable of presenting to you.
Right.
With like a seeded idea of what it should look like. And it does. Every place feels unique, and like you're gonna hate the jungle level, but it's the jungle level every time it shows up, because like the aesthetic design of it is all very on point.
Right. So yeah, big props to LucasArts on that front.
That honestly, we could have just replaced that whole conversation with, this is a LucasArts developed game.
Right.
That's kind of a thing that they're known for, both imaginative world design and also horribly letterboxed FMV.
Yeah,
hand in hand.
More importantly. So I guess to get to the question everybody wants to know, who's your favorite racer? Who's your main?
Okay, my favorite racer is Neva Key.
Okay.
But the one that I played through the game with was EB Endicott.
God, I don't even remember which one that is.
Well, he looks like a clown man, which I laughed at and then decided to just use him for the whole game.
Yeah, Fudd Sang had that energy to me. I was like, I bet Chad picked this guy.
Okay. I did do a few races after I finished the game, just like in the quick play mode, and I played a little bit of Fudsang, yeah. So sue me. I played a little Sebulba.
Yeah.
I played a little Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, Neva Key was a childhood favorite of mine. Like when you unlock them, they had like a really high speed like stat or whatever by default. So I always thought it was fun to play as Neva Key when I was a kid. But my favorite racer was always Gasgano, like the big tall neck and the green pod. It almost on like some level feels like it kind of like helped define my aesthetic tastes. Like how like cool I think that design is of that character and his pod.
That's true.
But yeah. So I stuck with him for the whole game.
Yeah. Neviki is always my favorite because of the pod design. I always really liked
detached.
Yeah, I was like, it's different. Therefore, I like it a lot. I also play a little bit of Odie Mandrell, which is just a name that I can't forget for some reason.
Yep. Yeah, I was surprised. Like, before booting the game up, I was like, I feel like I could name like 4 or 5 of the characters from this game because I played it so much as a kid.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, the only ones that didn't like ring any bells are the ones that had like English words as nicknames. Like there's a guy whose name is Bumpy and one whose name is Bullseye.
Right.
And I like didn't remember the names at all, like including the nickname. But then like looking at the model, I was like, oh, right. Bullseye is the onion shaped one.
Right.
So there's a lot of like weirdness sort of in that. The designs are all super good and obviously memorable considering neither of us you haven't like played this game in the last decade.
No, yeah. I probably haven't played it since like 2005 if I had to guess.
That's
that guy,
Endicott, by the way. Yeah. Great dude. But yeah, a lot of them very memorable, just like out of the box.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously some of it is because we are Star Wars fans, ostensibly, at least fans of the original trilogy and like the weird middle era where we were like, haha, the prequel trilogy sucks or whatever. We were those people who I think are more detached from the franchise these days.
Yeah. I definitely have like a nostalgic attachment to the prequels because we were so young when they came out. Like I think I was in 2nd or 3rd grade when the Phantom Menace came out. And I don't rewatch the movies very often. So the longer I go without seeing them, the more warm I feel towards them. And then if I ever catch one like at like a relative's house on a holiday or something, because they're kind of movies that they play on TV around the holidays, I'm always like taken aback by how bad they are.
I mean, if you don't mind me sharing a personal quote, Andy Kinnick circa like 2013 saying that Revenge of the Sith would be a better movie if it had just been 2.5 hours of George Lucas flipping off a camera.
I stand by that.
Yeah, I'm glad you have that a level of integrity to hold to that quote to this day.
Yeah, I know that they're bad movies, but like every time like I rewatch them or catch a snippet of them, I'm always like, oh, this is like twice as bad as I remember. Like it somehow is always jarring.
Yeah, it's always Jar Jar.
It's always Jar Jar. That is correct.
Except episode 1 Racer, the game, holds up really well, surprisingly well.
Yeah.
So we might bounce back a little bit into that more general discussion, but I do want to talk about the game because it rules and is kind of the main reason that we're doing this. So interesting fun fact. If I open this on my computer is about 1.5 years It's almost 2 years old now, but still fairly modern, I would say. If I open the 1999 video game Star Wars Episode 1 Racer on the computer, it eats a monitor and a half for seemingly no reason, no matter what the visual settings I put it on, and then crashes just sort of at random. So I instead played this on the Steam Deck, and it is shockingly good on the Steam Deck. Like,
interesting.
I don't generally like playing sort of reflex intensive games on the Steam Deck because I find it to be unwieldy and humongous. And this like worked really well on it. It did not crash or have display issues, which is even weirder to me. I had to do a little bit of control remapping to get the boost in a place that I was comfortable with actually using. But damn, it's just real good. And I probably won't uninstall it because it's funny to like have available at all times, especially considering I unlocked everything in the game.
Is it in a 4:3 aspect ratio?
No, it's actually stretched
It's
to
actually
16:9.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just curious if it had widescreen support. Yeah, I played the remastered version on the Switch, so it just runs fine.
Yeah. I am actually interested to know what differences there are, if there are changes.
I mean, I don't know, but it seems like it's just a remaster. Like it's just the game ported in HD. Is what
it's like
just
higher textures.
Yeah, just what it seemed like to me, but I don't know if they tweaked anything.
That makes sense. I think I wasn't expecting a big change from the original to the remaster because there rarely is in things like these. So, but hey, I'm glad to hear that it worked. But on the note of me having to remap controls and stuff, which this isn't really about that, but you know, for the sake of the segue, the racing in this game is extremely good off the bat. It feels like very fast. It feels when you first start playing the game, it feels very true to the movie, where you are moving uncontrollably fast. I love that it has a miles per hour counter, as if in the Star Wars universe they used MPH as like the speed measurement, and that in that the game is in any way simulating you going 600 miles an hour, because I don't think it is. But you end up like you're flying around, and like the traction and controls are really like weird and difficult to get a hang of for like a couple of minutes. And if you bump into anything, your pod just explodes into a fireball. It's such like a good bad introduction to the game, because you have this like moment of, and you'll still win regardless, because the AI, especially in the early levels, is very, very easy to beat. You just like fly off the starting line, smash into a rock immediately, and explode into a fireball. I feel like is the perfect mission statement for what the game is like. But then as you progress through the game and you practice a little bit and you get more like a deeper understanding of the mechanics of the game, it is also actually very skill testing in like just a basic, can you control your pod racer well enough to beat the race without dying too many times way. And I think that is like the core thing that keeps me liking this game. It is a great balance between just spectacle, like fun, fast spectacle, and actual, not exceedingly deep, but like skill testing, reflex based racing.
Yeah, I feel like it's balanced pretty perfectly. Because like you said, it's very true to the movie in like trying to emulate it. In the sense that it is very treacherous and dangerous. It is easy to just explode. Like in fucking 2 seconds flat. But like it's not frustrating. Like it's just like doable enough, I think. That like it becomes super engaging. Like you're like very much like, you know, like that gamer mode where you're like hyper, you're on the edge of the seat, you're like really focused, you got your tongue out, you know, you got your surge.
Leaning forward.
Yeah, leaning forward.
You got your surge.
You got your Jolt Cola or whatever. Yeah, and it's really engaging and not frustrating. Except there's maybe like one or two levels that frustrated me, which I think is pretty good track record, all things considered. So yeah, and it's got a great difficulty curve too, I think, with a couple of bumps, but like mostly like it starts out pretty easy, like the first tournament, the beginner tournament, like I think I beat everything first try, and then like the second tournament, like I think ramps up nicely, and then the third one's pretty hard. So yeah, like it overall, like I don't know if it's like the scope of the game being as short as it is allowed them to like laser focus on like ironing that out, but like it is a pretty smooth curve on a probably pretty hard to pull off like difficulty. So
yeah, I think that maybe this is too nitty gritty for this moment in the discussion, but I do think that they made a weird decision in terms of how they ramped the difficulty, because otherwise I do agree with you. There are like two levels that I would consider genuinely very hard in a way that I don't think maybe was even intended to be like the primary source of difficulty in them. And that is Abyss and Inferno, which are both invitational tracks. Mm-hmm. So like you only get them after you've beaten everything else. And I forget, one of them unlocks a character I don't remember, and the other one unlocks Quadranera, Ben Quadranera. Mm-hmm. So that one's pretty important. Everybody's got to do that one.
Of course.
Everybody loves Ben Quadranera. But there is like a pretty smooth difficulty curve up to that point. I think that it's weird because traditional racing design would tell you that if you made a game where you wanted an escalating difficulty curve, you would have the more complex tracks where you're making a lot of turns and forcing the player to sort of more to play with their speed a little bit more would be the way to increase the difficulty. And I think that they use that in a few levels. Mm-hmm. But I think far more interestingly is this game's boost mechanic, which is incredible. I love it. You have to charge it up by holding up, so you can't make any turns. So you have to drive completely straight to charge it up, and then activate it, at which point you can turn, but it's hard to do.
Right.
And you rock it, like you almost double your speed during boost moments. And finding those moments to me, and probably only to me, was like finding the optimal star power usage in a song in a Rock Band or a Guitar Hero game.
Right.
And I found that to be so much fun that I just resented whenever there was like a really like complicated track where I just couldn't boost and was just doing turns.
Right.
So I feel like that colors my sort of view of like what levels I think are good and which ones I like less. Mm-hmm. But I still think that the curve ends up pretty good, but I think that the spikes are almost always for me like whatever the jungle planet is called.
Yeah, dude, fuck that level. They really, I think, knew what they were doing. It puts extra salt in the wound that Anakin is the the record holder on that race. So if you lose, you lose to him, and you have to hear stupid Jake Lloyd's like voice quotes when he passes you and stuff. Makes it extra
very
annoying.
Funny.
Yeah.
And it's like the only time like in the game that you will hear an insult in English.
Right.
Honestly, very kind of sadistic on the part of Lucasarts on that one.
Yeah, but I think it does feel like they up the difficulty almost like in like a like puzzly kind of way, kind of like what you were describing. You have to like learn the track, find the spots where it's good to do the boost, like learn when to use the brakes and like where do you have the opportunity to repair your engines without, losing too much ground, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, and that it's not a whole lot of things to manage, but I think it does kind of hit a sweet spot where it is really fun to manage those things and to figure out.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I'm sort of more middling on, because I do like that, and I think the reason that we feel that way about sort of the boosting and the braking as like fun elements of learning the game is because the AI in the game is so pitifully bad most of the time, especially like your first like 3 hours of this game, you might not see another racer.
When it is one of those kind of games where, there's like no rubber banding at all at the begin, at least in the first tournament. Because like if you get ahead, you just stay ahead.
Yeah, pretty much forever. It's crazy, like how much difference there is. And especially like getting later on, like even in the invitationals, I didn't find the AI to be very difficult. It was more the tracks became difficult. And so I was more focused on not dying. Like runs that I came in first are usually just, what did I not die?
Right.
Versus like, was I jockeying for position?
Right. Which I mean, can be pretty like hard to go through a track without dying at all.
Yeah. I think Inferno is like one of, I hate that level. It's my least favorite level in the game by a pretty wide margin. It's like it's one of the volcano levels, but it's like mostly in the volcano, and I just can't see any of the obstacles at all because it's like dark brown on red on brown. And so it just was like I would go around a turn and like if you hit a rock. The way the geometry system works is like if the rock is too much of the front of your thing, you won't glance off of it. You'll just explode or your engine will blow up.
Right.
So there's just like a lot of dying in that one. So I just had to take it very slow and methodical to actually come in first on it. And it was extremely boring and I hated every second of it. Abyss is a similar problem, but for different reasons.
Yeah. I didn't do all the invitationals, but the ones that like gave me the most trouble were the ones like that jungle level that had like a bunch of turns. Because like I hadn't really been using the brakes up to that point. Because as a kid, I don't even remember if I knew you could brake. Like I may have just never done it. So I hadn't really been using them, and then I was like, how are you supposed to make these turns? And like I had to like look up what button it was because I couldn't figure it out. It was like, is there like a drifting mechanic in this game that like I don't know about? Like I was like, these turns are really hard to make, even when you can brake. So like it's like the one part of the game where I'm like, I feel like I'm like not picking up what the developers are putting down. Like I don't know like how the optimal way to do this really is. Because the AI seems like they don't have to slow down that much to make the turns.
Yeah, the AI does just seem to go through it without too much issue. It's funny because on one of the invitational tracks, there's like a part of the track where if you fall, there's like 2 stories to it. If you fall onto the second story, it puts you onto a different path that just takes a comically long time.
Is it like
the difference is
the stage is like with the bridges where you can like kind of I know what you mean.
It's the wire bridges, yeah. And there will be times where the AI will fall off on those. And if they do, you'll just never see them again unless you're lapping them. But then for some reason, like 5 or 6 or 7, like a majority of the AI just goes through that section with no issue every time because it's just like a pathing thing.
Right.
I don't know how it works in that way. But I genuinely don't think that they have the same rules as the player, which is why you don't see them like hitting the air brake and doing jittery turns going around those tight turns.
Right.
I think it is just like cheating to an extent.
It's just so noticeable that like it made me feel like I was doing something wrong.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, you were a human. That's what
Right.
was
Yeah, I
wrong.
didn't have those Jedi reflexes.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say another thing I really like about the tracks is how long they are. Like that's another thing I associate this game with. Yeah, I don't know if like F-Zero also had really long tracks. That's like the other like the thing I would compare this game to, because you go really fast, and maybe also the tracks are long in F-Zero. It would make sense if you go fast to make the tracks a little bit longer. So,
That does make sense.
but yeah, like to me, it's a unique thing for a racing game because I've never played F-Zero. But yeah, I just something that I think it adds to that like edgy your seat 90s gamer thing. Like you get into like that like kind of flow state with it, and like you're just kind of like fixated on the screen, and like the laps can take like fucking 4 minutes on some of the later stages. So like you're there for like 12 minutes just like glued to the track, and I don't know, there is just something like kind of satisfying about it, and it can also make it like a great one of those games that's like great at passing time. Right, because like you do like one race and it just like it felt like maybe 5 minutes, but it was actually like twice as long as that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well. Like I was comparing sort of the cinematic version of the Boon to Eve Classic to the 1 minute and like 30 seconds that you spend on that track in the game, and I was like, that does seem, because it's such a dramatic scene in the film about everybody jockeying for position, and for them to make the level as short as they did in the game. And I was like, nah, that's a little bit weird. And then like a couple of levels later, I'm like, that took like 9 minutes
Right.
to finish one level in this.
Oh, and then they bring the Boon to Eve Classic back for the last race too, and I think that's supposed to be the more movie accurate version.
Right. There's the part where you drive. I praised the game earlier for being like, a lot of these aren't like big named planets. They're not relying on your nostalgia or your like name association to enjoy. They just did a good job of building these worlds. I really appreciate that Tatooine level for all of the dumb nerd references that I like to see.
Right.
I like getting shot at by the fucking Tusken Raiders. I like dodging the sandcrawler and hearing the Jawa noises.
The sandcrawler is a nice touch.
Yeah. Lots of stuff in that I'm a big fan of. So I do agree that is the one that they're kind of going for. But I just didn't know when I started the game.
Yeah.
I forgot that level existed.
Yeah, and it's like I think also like not that it was probably ILM did the special effects, I imagine, for the movie. They don't need praised. They're like the big dogs of visual effects already. But like I think it speaks to the visual design of that sequence that there's so many things you recognize in it, right? Like the canyon that you go through, and it's got like the little crevice that you exit out of, and like you go through like the part with like the big rocks and like the big like weird formations and stuff, and then like the starting line and everything is like surprisingly well recreated for an N64 game.
Speaking of that tiny crevice that you go out of, they include a few of these in the game, like just very tight areas that you have to like zip through. And seemingly to accommodate this, they've also included a button on the controller that makes your pod just like tip up on its side.
Right.
I wish that was like way more frequent. Not necessarily the like tiny holes that you have to fly through, but I wish that there was more reason to tip the racer on one side or another than there is, because it's such a there's 2 buttons on the controller dedicated to doing it. It's weird that it comes up like maybe a few times, and it's never like necessary if you just go in the middle.
Right. Dude, do you ever get fucked over by that door that spins?
Oh yeah. but this might be a potential difference in the remaster.
Uh-huh.
I got fucked over by it a lot because it didn't draw in until I was pretty close.
Okay.
And then I had to react to which direction it was.
That's definitely better on the remaster. Draw distance was not an issue on the
That's
remaster.
good. They definitely should have maybe given it priority in loading there.
Yeah.
Though also, fuck that level for having the low gravity asteroid tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
Where I don't know how you're supposed to avoid all the asteroids.
Yeah, it is pretty hard to do. But like you can like tilt your pod to kind of dodge around them by just like moving the analog stick.
Oh, yeah. I know that you can move, but to me, you can never move enough.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe you just didn't. It gave me very like Rascal skateboarding section moments where it would be like, oh, I've gone around a turn and now there's a giant boulder in my way.
Right.
And I don't know which direction is going to be more spacious for me to get around. And it was difficult to tell if when you hit something you were going to explode or just take damage.
Yeah, so it was big enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember if it was that same level or another similar one. But like there was a part where you'd race through like this big kind of like more open tunnely area. And then there would be like a zero gravity thing you would like drop down into. And like I don't know what causes it, but I think like 75% of the time I would just explode when I went through there. And I don't know if I was going too fast or if I hit it at a weird angle or like there's like a sweet spot. Like,
yeah, I don't think that this is a too fast thing, but it is speed. Like, I don't know if I don't think it's supposed to be like this. But if you hit it going over a certain amount, you will just explode. And I remembered that after it happened to me the first time. From when I was a kid, I was like,
this would always happen. I remember this.
Yep, it was the fucking exhaust port. I used to bullseye womp rats in my T16 back home. They're not much bigger than 2 meters.
You know,
then I exploded.
We probably should have tried spinning. That would be a good trick.
That would have been a good trick. But yeah, you just blow up. There's like on one of the bridge levels, I know that there is a place where in one of the turns, if I turned at a certain spot, there would just be a piece of like tangible ground that my engine would blow up on.
Oh yeah.
So I just had to like avoid a certain area. The game is not flawlessly programmed.
Right.
But yeah, that little exhaust port moment, 100% will blow you up for no reason.
Yeah. Well, another detail that I like is obviously like pods in, Star Wars. They like hover, right? And I think that's really interesting, and I like how like they toy with like lower gravity, like on that like I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that like on that asteroid level there's lower gravity, so you just go faster. I think that's a cool thing. Like when you go off jumps, you can kind of like angle your engines to like descend slower. Like, I think it's, they don't do like a ton of cool things with it, but I think it's cool that they like clearly put thought into the fact that your vehicles hover off the ground.
Yeah. I also think that they apply, this might be apocryphal, and I should have looked it up before I started talking about it, now that I'm thinking about it. But I think they also like consider, like, I think on the ice planet, I think your engines cool down faster.
Yeah.
And when you're going over water and stuff.
Yeah. Kind of on the opposite side of the coin. When you go over ice, you have less traction, which feels like it doesn't make any sense. But that's also interesting. Like that they considered. Yeah, like I don't know if that's true either, but I also felt like it was true that like your engines cool faster.
Right. It seems like the kind of thing that the game would have, especially as a kid, and so that's just how it is in my head. That I believe it. Don't tell me otherwise. I do want to talk about, speaking of engines cooling faster, buying cooling upgrades. So I learned something new on this playthrough that I didn't know when I was 10 or whatever.
Right.
And I don't think that I ever engaged with the junkyard as a kid.
Uh-huh.
And I wouldn't have now, except I was just curious because I didn't remember it. And it's so weird that the game doesn't tell you shit about anything. But if you, in like the upgrades, if you buy pit droids, then the pit droids will repair parts of your pod. And so if you buy things from the junkyard, you can get them cheaper. And then the pit droids will repair them. And then you can trade them in for better parts at the full price when they're repaired. Which is a level of economy that I did not want or need from a pod racing game, first of all, but also was kind of interesting to see that there was this whole system of like random degraded parts obtaining that I just like didn't know about when I was a kid or like didn't participate in at all.
Yeah, I had the exact same experience. I in fact even had to like look up, like I was like, because I remember as a kid thinking the menus were confusing. You know, I didn't know why, because I was like 10 or whatever. But like, I just remember like it being like confusing, like how to navigate and like what anything was. Like I may not have ever gone to the junkyard either. I don't remember. Like I didn't even really remember if I ever engaged with the pit droid, like being able to repair your pods while racing. I don't know if I ever even knew you could do that as a kid. But yeah, like I think the UI is actually really terrible. The menus are very confusing and hard to navigate, and like it's hard to know like when like the way that like the animations are. Like when you're like in the shop, like the thing is blinking and you hit buy and like nothing changes. You're like, did I buy it or not? Like, you know, like there isn't really like any kind of, there's a lack of feedback.
Yes.
That I find even now as an adult kind of confusing.
There's even like when you go to buy a thing from Watto's shop, right? It's like fucking in the top left corner is like the retail price of the item.
Right.
And then there's a box on the right that has the part that you're looking at. Or no, that you have currently. And it says cost. And then it also says trade in. And then there's a button for like the first time I bought anything, it took me like a good minute to even understand what anything was referring to.
Yeah.
Because there's like a price, a cost, a trade-in, and they're all calculated together to get like the final value.
Yeah, I didn't even notice there was like a bar on the top where you can like scroll through parts either.
Right, yeah.
Like nothing is obvious.
Nothing is obvious. Everything is kind of bad.
Yeah, you got to get out a notepad.
There's like a...
To make notes, got to study.
All of the parts that you have like a damage meter that is basically unnoticeable unless you're in very specific menus. Like it's such a disaster. And I like the like Death Stranding style. You are in the cantina and you're like looking around.
Oh yeah, I like that
diegetic menu system. And I think it is worth some sacrifice to get that for the sake of like the Star Warsiness and the immersion of the game. But I think too much was lost. Like even just do a race, right? Like technically speaking, all you have to do is press the A button like 6 times. But you choose your racer, then you choose the track, and then you're taken to a menu that has a change racer option on it.
Right.
At the bottom for some
it says
reason.
Change vehicle too, which makes it seem like like you're not changing characters.
But you are, make no mistake.
Yeah.
And then it has 3 menus: inspect vehicle, upgrade parts, and buy parts, that all go to the same fucking menu.
Right.
Every one of them is just a different way to get to Watto's store. And then the junkyard, which is a unique and different menu. It's so bizarrely implemented. It seems like they sort of had a first draft and then they were like, I don't want to cut anything because it's going to be too hard to do. So we all these menu options, we're going to leave them in.
Mm-hmm. It does kind of feel like it definitely wasn't iterated on enough. That's for sure.
Yeah. Which sucks. This is one of the main things that I think like a modern sort of hand on this would really, it would clean up so nice.
Yeah, for sure.
To make it work. God bless John Williams.
Amen. This game contains the two best things from the entire prequel trilogy, which is the song Duel of the Fates and pod racing.
Yes. I hate intellectual property law in a general sense, but the fact that this game, which is by all means should have been just a footnote in the Star Wars franchise historically, was able to use like some of the most classic cinematic music of all of history. And it's just like, hey, you're playing as a guy whose name is like Fud Bolt, crashing into rocks and exploding while a teenager screams insults at you. Mm-hmm. But also, here's like a classic John Williams score.
Yeah.
It's such a good inclusion.
Oh, yeah. No, it's awesome. But this is just probably due to limited space on the cartridge. Like, I do wish there was more music. Because I feel like there's only like 6 tracks or something like that. Like, there's not that much music. But, yeah, luckily it is incredible John Williams music.
It is good. I agree. It'd be nice if there's a little bit more. Even just like, because I like I think if you just like hang out for a while on the menu, like Watto will start like humming the fucking Cantina theme and shit. Even just like little like diegetic things like that would play when you were in other things would do a lot to sort of spruce up. Like when you're in the like parts menu, all you hear is just like welding in the background.
Yeah. Hammering, welding.
Yeah. Which I also like, but it'd be nice if there was a backdrop to it, you know?
Yeah. Once again, people who worked on Star Wars don't need to be praised anymore for this sort of thing, but like the sound design, so great. Most of that's just lifted from the movies, but like the countdown to the start of the race is like one of those sounds that just like embedded in my head. I'm not going to do an impression of it, but like just the sound of the countdown, it's just like, oh yeah, that's some of like the all-time classic video game sound effects right there.
It really is. That's, I think, also from the movie.
I couldn't remember.
Yeah, I'm not 100%
like the
sure.
symbols
but I do think
that like blink on the screen. Wow, I love that.
Yeah, extremely good. They do such a good job with just sort of like the scenery, in that way. Do we have Fud Sang thoughts?
My Fud Sang thoughts are, this was a game that, like, I don't know what put it in my head a few years ago. Probably the fact that the remaster was coming out or something. I was like, we should definitely revisit that for the podcast. Because I loved this game as a kid. And I did not disappoint going back to it. It was a lot of fun. I think, I feel like the game really does nail like the Star Wars aesthetic and atmosphere surprisingly well for an N64 game. I like how like unique it feels as a racing game, at least from my perspective. I like how fast it is. It really evokes those feelings of the movie. Feels really fast, feels really dangerous. I like how long the tracks are. Like, it really sucks you in and engages you. You get those sweaty palms while you're sitting on the edge of your seat. It's a very focused experience, and I think it really benefits from that. Like, a lot of N64 PS1 games don't hold up, and I think this one really does. Um, yeah, and I genuinely feel like pod racing, one of the few really cool things from the prequels that people remember fondly. So I think I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I would love to see like a full-on remake that really expands this, adds more tracks and music and characters and stuff, or just a sequel, like like essentially like a reboot or a reimagining or something. I think that would be fucking awesome. So yeah, like I don't know, yeah. Was not disappointed. This is like a cool surprisingly, I don't know, surprisingly, like a weird little gem, I think, even though it's a non-hidden gem because everybody knows what this is.
Right. I do think this is like a non-final thought that you just sort of forced into my head there at the end. The idea of them adding more characters is honestly kind of blasphemy to me because first of all, there's so many characters in this game. There's like 25 or something. But also, I do love the spread of characters because it is a mix of iconic characters like Anakin, Sebulba, Ben Quadraro, and also it's like Mario Kart if the roster was like Mario, Luigi, Bowser, and then like 30 characters that were all like dry bones, where it's like the people who are weird refuse to play the regular normal characters, people like myself, are just having a heyday. They're like, let me play fucking Fudd Rucker or whoever else, like weird alien guy, and you can like the character design or the pod design because they're tied together in a way. So it's just kind of cool. I like the characters a lot. I know we already kind of talked about that, but it is crazy how many of them there are. Anyway, my my Fudd sang thoughts. Yeah, the things you said. I thought that this game I was surprised at how engaging this game was coming back to it. I did expect to think that it might be but in reality, the two genre of games that hold up beyond nostalgia from the N64 era somehow are pod racing and rail shooter photography. Every time that just seems like these are underrepresented genres in video games that need to be more well explored. I loved sort of like the actual racing of the game. I think that the sense of speed is really well implemented, which makes the game feel so much more sort of like chaotic and exciting compared to other simulation racers. I think that the boosting system is extremely cool. It's very skill testing. It's very rewarding when you get it down. And I liked to sort of like learn tracks and find out where the best places to use it were. And yeah, it's good. Like you said, the music great, could have more of it. I can barely think of anything else to add because we talked about everything. This game is so short. Like I got as far as like the game is concerned, I got 100% completion of this game and it took me like 5 hours. Mm-hmm. So this is 100% worth going back to play. If you haven't played it, I hope that it is also for you. I don't know. It's not like so hard that it's going to like break your will to play it after the first few races. And it really is just sort of like a weird little time capsule that, goddamn it, shouldn't be a time capsule. We should be drowning in pod racing games, but here we are.
Yeah. We didn't mention the voiceover that says, "It's a new lap record." Every time you said a lap record.
The fastest racer in the galaxy. Just good shit.
Yep.
All around.
Good shit.
Thank you for listening to No Clip this week.
What are we talking about next time?
next time, we're going to be talking about Slay the Princess, the last game that we will be doing this year prior to the No Clip Awards. And which means, thus, ergo, vis-a-vis the No Clip Awards, remember that it's getting around that time for people to be submitting some games for Fan Brewery. And I believe we may have stolen one by doing Slay the Princess right now. Because that was put in our suggestions channel at some point in the past. So yeah, get those in. Get excited for the next episode and also for the No Clip Awards. And for, the holiday season. Everybody likes a little time off. But until that time, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com or on splattershot.pro. There you can find links to our Twitter account, our email address, the Discord server, all fantastic places for you to suggest games for Fan Brewery. And you can find our YouTube channel, and you can listen to all of our old episodes. Is this the first Star Wars game we did?
Yes.
That's crazy. There's so many of them. It seems like just by happenstance we would have stumbled into one at this point. We talked about Everspace, which is a space-based simulation type game, which is marginally similar to this.
We did Snowboard Kids 2, which is an N64 racing game.
We did Diddy Kong Racing.
True, also.
Which is an N64 racing game. If you're an N64 racing game, it's likely we've covered it.
Except for Mario Kart.
Okay, that's maybe
and Wave Race 64.
a little bit of an oversight. Yeah. Oh yeah, we didn't do it. I played the shit out of Wave Racing. Yeah. All right. Maybe we do race to the finish. We're going to talk about Super Smash Brothers on the N64.
All right, we need to shut down the podcast. We're getting loopy.
Smash that Super Smash Brothers one, that like button.
Smash your pod into the subscribe button. And
use Sebulba's unique taunt mechanic to catch your fellow commenters on fire in the comment section.
Yeah, start up a conversation with low poly Qui-Gon Jinn in the comment section.
All right, I'm back. It's the podcast, yada, yada, yada. Talking about stuff.